Hey guys, my name is Emily, if you haven't seen my face before, and today I'm going to be making a read with me vlog style video for the book Point of Retreat. This is by Colleen Hoover, and this is actually the second book in the Slammed series. I don't have a reading vlog for the first book in this series, but I did just make a reading vlog for Hopeless, also by Colleen Hoover, and I think I'm probably going to do reading vlogs for the rest of her books too, just because I really enjoyed making that first one, and I definitely want to read all of her books. The majority of this video is going to be spoiler free, but I am going to be having a spoiler section at the end of this video to really give my thoughts on what happened in this book, because I do think that's necessary to really give you a full review. But don't worry, I'm going to give you lots of warning for that spoiler section, so if you haven't read this book yet, don't worry, you're not going to get spoiled as long as you avoid that spoiler section. If you aren't familiar with the Slam series, the first book was about Will and Lakin and their love story, how they got together, how they fell in love, and there was some taboo things going on in their relationship that really made it hard for them to be together after they ended up being neighbors. So I don't want to give too much away in terms of spoilers for sure, but this is a very early Colleen Hoover book. I think this series is probably one of the first series she wrote, if not one of the first books that she wrote. So I really was excited to start reading the second book because I loved the first book. The first book, Slammed, is the first book by Colleen Hoover that I've ever read, so I was really excited to jump on into the second book. So I didn't really have any expectations about what this book was about. All I knew was that it was most likely going to be following Will and Lakin's love story as it continued after the first book. This is very much a sequel, so if you haven't read the first book, I definitely recommend reading that one before you pick this one up. Alright, so I'm gonna just jump right in to the reading vlog, and I will see you guys later on to wrap up my thoughts. Okay guys, so I am just about to start Point of Retreat. I remember a little bit from the first book in this series, which would have been Slammed. I remember Lakin and Will, and I remember the context of their relationship. I don't remember too many details about where we left off in their relationship, but I think everything was good at the end, but we will see what the conflict is in this book. I think there is a third one as well, so obviously there's going to be some problems going on with their relationship, so I'm excited to see what this book entails. I don't know how much I'm going to read today, but I'm definitely going to start, and I will keep you guys posted on what's going on. Okay, so I've read the first 2 chapters of Point of Retreat. I think I'm on page 37. Let me just double check. Yes, I'm on page 37. So just at the beginning of the book, I have quite a long ways to go, but I've kind of gotten my bearings so far. This book is actually told from Will's perspective, so it's kind of flipped from the first book where we got Lakin's perspective. Now we're getting Will's perspective. So it's going to be a little bit different because we're having a different POV than the first book, but I'm kind of excited to see how Will talks about the story and all of that kind of stuff. So we'll see how this goes. There was a little bit of a time skip between the ending of the first book and this book, but more or less things are picking up where they left off. There's nothing really going on in terms of drama yet. There's just more so a little bit of feels coming back from the ending of the first book, but I don't want to give anything away if you guys haven't read that first book yet. So we will see how things go. I already really like these 2 characters from the original book, but it has been a while since I've read that first book, so my memory isn't like super great on all of the little details, but we will see, and I'm excited to keep reading. Hey guys, so I just made my way upstairs because it was getting a little bit loud down there and I wanted to keep reading. So I am now on page 75. I just finished chapter 4, and I now know what the point of retreat in the title is referring to. I think it was mentioned in the first 2 chapters, but I just didn't really realize it. But now I'm like, okay, yeah, no, I know what that's referencing to. You know, pretty early on, I guess I should say, what point of retreat means in terms of this story. And I feel like I know what the conflict is going to be because we just got introduced to a character, and I feel like I know what's going to happen. And honestly, I'm hoping I'm wrong because I feel like that isn't as dramatic as I want the book to be, and I'm going to be a little bit disappointed if that's really what this book is about, but I will definitely keep you guys posted. I'm starting to remember who the other characters are, like Eddie and Kel and Calden. I think his name is Calden, I think is how you say it. The brothers and Lakin's friends. I'm starting to remember a little bit of that, and I'm looking forward to hopefully being surprised by what's going to happen, but we will see. Alright guys, it's now day 2 of reading Point of Retreat, and I just read to page 108, so I just finished the 6th chapter, and the thing that I thought was going to happen happened.
I'm not surprised because it was kind of predictable, not gonna lie. And I'm hoping this isn't like the major conflict of the book, because I'm gonna be really disappointed because it was so predictable and it's just not that engaging in my opinion. I feel like they're just gonna work it out and it's not gonna take much to just resolve this issue. So I'm hoping there's gonna be more to it. There are just over 300 pages in this book, so I am just over a third of the way through. There is still lots of time for things to pick back up, but so far I'm not loving this book nearly as much as I did the first one. It's just not as grabbing to me because there's just not as much drama and plot happening. It's more so just catching up with the characters and now this predictable conflict which I saw coming. So I'm gonna keep reading. Hopefully something interesting happens and I will update you guys shortly. All right, I just got to page 142 and this was chapter 8, so I am trucking along. I'm gonna read a little bit more today, at least until page 200, I'm thinking. Right now, we're definitely in some conflict. Things went a little bit farther than I thought they were going to go in terms of the conflict I predicted, but at the same time, I feel like they're just going to make up very quickly, and I feel like this is not going to go on for that long. I am definitely a bit disappointed that this is probably going to be the main conflict. There's still time for things to turn around, but at the same time, I'm almost halfway through now, so we will see. There are quite a few quotes in the book. You can see there that little blurb is a quote. I don't know if they're real quotes or not. I feel like they probably are from real people. I'm not going to tell you what the quotes are about because that is definitely a spoiler and where they came from, but I think that's a nice touch. I really like the concept of how those quotes are being worked into the book, and I'm still looking forward to the book picking up a little bit. I'm not enjoying it. I'm still enjoying the book, but it's just not as gripping and exciting as the first one was, unfortunately. I've been reading a bit more and I just got to page 204 and I guess I finished part 1 because here's part 2, and I didn't realize there was 2 parts, but I guess I'm 2/3 of the way into the book now and I'm gonna start part 2. I don't think I will read too much more tonight. I don't think I'm gonna finish the book. I think I'm gonna leave that for tomorrow, but I'm gonna read a little bit more and we'll see what goes on. The conflict, I think, was just resolved, so I think we're gonna have another conflict going on judging by how part 1 just ended. There's something that just happened that was unexpected, and I'm hoping it's gonna pick up from this event that just took place. So I will see you guys shortly for my last update of the night, most likely. I just finished page 223, which was chapter 13. I only have about 75 pages left, so I think I'm just going to finish tonight because why not? Things have picked up a little bit. There is some stuff going on that I didn't really see coming, but we don't really know the extent of it yet. So I'm just going to keep reading and hopefully things stay interesting and maybe have a dramatic ending, but we will see. So far, I'm not super impressed, but of course I am still enjoying the book. So I just finished chapter 15. I'm on page 256, and I feel like I was supposed to cry at what I just read, but I didn't. I'm almost done the book, and I'm honestly feeling like the book should have been longer because I feel like they're just about to wrap up some things, and I feel like nothing really happened that made me feel that much. So I'm hoping it's going to end strongly, but at the same time I don't really have that high of expectations because of how the book has been going so far. Again, it's not bad, it's just that it doesn't really compare to the first one in my opinion, but I haven't given up yet. I'm hoping it's going to end strongly and we will see. I think my last update is going to be when I finish the book because I only have about 40 pages left. Okay guys, I just finished Point of Retreat and I think it was a cute ending, and I'm definitely going to talk more about this whenever I wrap up the book, but I do think the ending was cute and I am excited to talk about this book more with you guys later on.
Alright guys, now let's talk about my overall thoughts on the book. So whenever I started this book, I was expecting it to be really, really good just because I loved Slammed. I gave the first book 4.5 out of 5 stars, I believe. So I had high expectations going into it. I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 5 stars. Personally, it just wasn't my favorite. I feel like it wasn't really needed at all. I feel like the first book would have been fine as a standalone. This didn't really add too much. Of course, it did add plot, and there is some development with the characters, but at the same time, it didn't really feel like it was worth it to me. Did we really need a sequel? I don't really think so. I am glad that I got to see more of the characters. I just wish it was a little bit more exciting and captivating, which unfortunately this book wasn't for me compared to the first book. If you were a really big fan of Slammed book number 1, I wouldn't say that I don't recommend reading the sequel. I still think it's worth it to you if you were a really big fan of the first book and you love the characters, because you are getting more of the characters obviously in this book. I just would recommend going into it with a little bit lower expectations and just kind of seeing this book as a complement to the first book, not another awesome, jam-packed, emotional roller coaster ride that the first book was, because you aren't really going to get that necessarily to that level with the sequel. Something else to mention too is the side characters were definitely a lot more focused on in the sequel compared to the first book. I feel like in Slammed, the side characters were pretty much just in the background, where the focus was really on Will and Lake. In this book, you are seeing more of the side characters and their relationships and that kind of thing, which to me personally, I didn't feel super attached to the side characters anyways from the first book, so I wasn't super intrigued in what was going on with all of the side characters in the sequel. So now we're going to get into the spoiler section for this book. So just a heads up, if you guys have not read Slammed book 1 and book 2, I would not recommend watching the spoiler section, because obviously I'm going to be talking about spoilers, and I really don't like to spoil anyone who doesn't want to be spoiled. So I'm giving you your fair warning, and we are about to jump into the spoiler discussion. We are now getting into our spoilers, so you have now been warned. The first thing I really want to talk about is Vaughn. Personally, I was not a fan of that whole plot line. I really didn't think it was necessary. It was so predictable. As soon as Will said, Lake doesn't need to know that I'm in a class with her, or she doesn't need to know right now at least. I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but as soon as he said that he wasn't going to tell her, I knew right away that was going to come back and bite him, and it definitely did. So I wasn't really a fan of that whole thing. I feel like it could have been done better, because it just wasn't really enjoyable for me, because it was so predictable. That being said, I feel like Lake's reaction to Vaughn's comments about them really being in love was kind of stupid, in my opinion. I feel like it was obvious that Will loved her for her, not because both of their parents died. I feel like that was kind of immature on Lake's part, but at the same time she is still very young and she's not a full adult yet, so that's kind of excusable in my opinion. But I wasn't a huge fan of the reason why they were having this big conflict. It just didn't seem to make sense to me personally, but that's totally just my opinion. You guys might love that plot line, it just wasn't my favorite. I also really didn't care that much about Eddie and Gavin's pregnancy. Honestly, like I was saying before, the side characters were not significant to me really in the first book. It wasn't that I didn't like them, it was more so that I didn't really feel attachment towards them, so finding out that they had a pregnancy going on wasn't really super impactful for me, unfortunately. I didn't really feel much for those characters at all. Something else I did want to mention is the carving pumpkin references. Carving pumpkins is a reference from the first book, which I loved in the first book. I felt like it was such a cute concept, but they mentioned it so many times in this book. I want to say it was probably 6 or 7 times, and I'm not exaggerating, the amount of times that they've said the phrase, "You're carving pumpkins, I'm carving pumpkins, something carving pumpkins," which was cute like the first 2 times, and I was like, yeah, that's awesome that they're referencing the first book, but the more that it happened, the more and more I was like done with it, and I was over it, and I just didn't want to hear about carving pumpkins anymore. Them talking about carving pumpkins made me want to carve pumpkins. I wouldn't have really minded if carving pumpkins was mentioned like 4 times in the whole book if they were really spread out. 4 times might be pushing it, maybe 3. But the fact that it was back to back sometimes, like sometimes on the same page or like one page after another, it was too much carving pumpkins for me. Next up is the car accident. So whenever the car accident happened, I thought it was going to be this huge deal, which it kind of was, and it definitely was the center topic for the rest of the book after it happened, but I thought there were going to be more lasting effects and that it was going to be a more serious incident than it really was. Ultimately, she just ended up recovering. There might be some lasting effects that we don't know about, maybe in the third book, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to be reading next. Maybe we'll talk more about the after effects of the car accident, but it didn't really seem like there were any in this book. She pretty much just recovered and they got married and all was well. I am a sucker for books that make me cry. This book brought me close, but I didn't quite get there. I think it was one of the scenes whenever Laken was in the hospital and Will was there with her, thinking that he was going to lose her and that he was going to have to raise her little brother by himself. And it almost got me, but I didn't quite get over that hurdle to actually cry. So I would have liked there to be a little bit more emphasis on the aftermath of the car accident, like more dramatic stuff happening maybe. I don't know. I mean, I love the characters. I don't want anything bad to happen to them, but at the same time, when it comes to a good book, I really like plot twists and stuff going on like that. And I didn't really feel like there was any of that in this book. I think the biggest plot twist was Vaughn hooking up with Will's best friend, which was not, like, I didn't feel anything about that, so I didn't really get the plot twisty kind of revelation stuff in this book at all. Obviously, the car accident did affect them immediately, but after she recovered and she was out of the hospital, their relationship pretty much just went back to how it was. So it didn't really seem like it had that much importance. The last thing that I wanted to mention about this book that I wasn't really a fan of was the fact that Will actually disabled Laken's car battery just to get her to go into the car with him and talk. And he made a comment about the fact that by now I should know how to manipulate you, or you would think by now I would know what to do to manipulate you. I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but it was something along the lines of him making a joke about not being able to manipulate her, and for whatever reason that just rubbed me the wrong way. I really loved Will in the first book, and I loved him in the rest of this book, but whenever that scene happened, I was just kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that. Just the way that he said it, it didn't sit right with me, so I wasn't really a fan of that, and I feel like that was kind of out of character for him. I'm pretty sure it was meant in a joking way, but still the fact that he said that, I just wasn't a huge fan of. I don't want to make it seem like I really didn't like this book, because I did enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy it nearly as much as the first one, but there were still things that I really liked about this book. One of my favorite parts in this book was the vase that Laken's mom gave them as a gift with the little stars that had quotes in them. I thought that was so, so cute. I love the fact that they could just pick out a star whenever they needed some support, and a little helpful quote would be there. Sometimes they were funny, sometimes they were actually really meaningful, and I just love that whole concept. I thought it was really, really cute. I also loved that poetry was still an importance in this book. They still went to slams sometimes and still read some poetry, which was a really cute part of the first book. I thought that was kind of unique, and I didn't really read a book before that really focused on poetry or slam poetry. Honestly, I never even knew slam poetry was a thing until I read Slammed, and that honestly made me want to go to one, and reading this second book made me want to go to one even more. So I will probably find a way to get to one at some point. I just don't know any that are going on at this time, but hopefully one day I will get to go to one. I also really liked the fact that this book never bored me. I thought it was a good length, although some stuff wasn't really necessary. I was never bored when I was reading it. I finished the book in 2 sittings. It wasn't as captivating as the first book, but at the same time, I don't think there was anything that was really bad about it that would make this book unpleasant to read by any means. It definitely was still a decent read for sure. So that wraps up my spoiler section. Please let me know down below if you have read these books and what your opinions are. Just please remember to keep them spoiler free, because there might be people watching this video who have not read these books yet. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to, you can go ahead and leave a like, a comment, or subscribe if you want, and I will see you next time. Thanks guys. Bye. God bless.